The bayou was a place where sound died too quickly and secrets lived too long. Cypress trees leaned over the black water like silent witnesses, their roots gripping the mud as if holding on to stories they were forbidden to tell. It was a land of steam, cane, and blood, where night could suffocate a man faster than a rope. Every plantation along the Louisiana bayou whispered about one name, not the masters, not the overseers, a slave's, Jarrow. A cane cutter with arms forged by the swamp's heat, a back laced with scars, and a stare that made riders look away. He never raised his voice. He barely spoke at all. But he moved through the bayou like something born from it, silent, patient, and waiting. The Klan called him the shadow that walks. The slaves called him Bayou Brother. But the swamp knew better. It had raised him. It had taught him to hear lies in the wind and danger in the tremble of a frog's croak. And on one infamous night, when 30 Klan riders rode with torches high, hunting a fugitive girl through the dark, those torches would go out one by one. Because Jarrow had decided the swamp would take back what belonged to it, and he would be the one to deliver the men who tried to own him. The cane fields swayed like waves under the dusk, tall green blades rattling against each other as if warning what was coming. Slaves bent low over the stalks, swinging machetes in a rhythm forced into their bones. But tonight, even the whips were strangely quiet, because everyone could feel the stillness, not the calm kind, the dangerous kind. Jarrow stood at the edge of the field, gripping his cane knife, the metal reflecting a smear of dying sunlight. Sweat rolled down his back, but he didn't wipe it away. He was listening again, ears sharp, body stiff, head tilted just slightly as if catching whispers the others couldn't hear. Jarrow, an older slave murmured behind him. "You feelin' it too?" Jarrow didn't answer. He simply breathed in. Smoke, not from the sugar mill, not from the overseer's pipe. Torch smoke. His jaw tightened. Down the path that cut through the cane like a scar, horses were approaching. Slow, heavy, purposeful, and there were too many footsteps for it to be the patrol. The overseer squinted into the deepening dusk, confused. He wasn't expecting company, but Jarrow was. He had heard the rumors before anyone else, the whispers that a runaway girl named Celie was hiding somewhere between the swamp and the cane rows. A girl who slapped a white boy when he tried to put his hands on her. A girl whose mother had been sold for less. The Klan wanted her, wanted the lesson her blood would teach. Jarrow felt the swamp tighten around him, like it was holding its breath. Then the first torch appeared, a bright orange smear floating in the dusk. Then another, and another. 30 riders emerged from the darkness of the trail. White hoods, ropes at their sides, rifles slung casually across shoulders. Their torches blazed, lighting the edges of the cane with a hungry glow. The slaves froze. The overseer stiffened, but Jarrow stepped backward, melting into the tall green walls of cane. The Klan captain spat into the dirt. "We're looking for a runaway girl. Brown skin, small, fast. Heard she came through these parts." And the overseer swallowed. "No one's run through here." Jarrow smiled from the shadows. A slow, dangerous smile. Because he had just spotted Celie curled up at the base of a cane cluster, eyes wide, breath quivering, trying to make herself small. She was no more than 15. Jarrow lowered a finger to his lips. She nodded silently. The Klan captain lifted his torch, the flame hissing. "We'll search the fields. Don't get in our way." As the riders spread out, torches slicing through the night like glowing knives, Jarrow vanished deeper into the cane, moving silently through tunnels he himself had carved over years. He knew every route, every sinkhole, every shadow. He whispered into the dark, to the swamp itself. "They shouldn't have come here." The bayou answered with the low croak of frogs and the swirl of mist rolling in from the water. The perfect cover. The Klan's torches flickered, then wavered. Then, one by one, went dark. Jarrow tightened his grip on his knife. Tonight the swamp would feast. Tonight the riders would learn fear. And Jarrow, the cane cutter slave no man had ever truly seen, would become the nightmare they tried to bury. The sun had not yet surrendered to the horizon when the rest of the cane-cutting crew dragged themselves back toward the quarters, but Marcel stayed behind. His machete still glimmered with sap, his shirt clung to his spine, and sweat trickled down his jaw like a second river. The others had begged him to leave with them. The woods felt wrong, the air too still, the birds too silent. But Marcel only nodded and said he had just a few more rows to finish. End quote. The truth was simpler and more dangerous. Marcel was waiting. He felt them before he heard them, the faint press of hoofbeats traveling through the ground, the warning shiver in the frogs along the waterline. Even the cane leaves seemed to stiffen at an angle that told him something human and hateful approached. The clan moved in silence when they wanted to, but horses were horses, and men filled with cruelty always leaked noise through their bones. Marcel hid his machete in the dirt at his feet, wiped his hands on his trousers, and crouched low between the stalks. His heart thudded loud enough to betray him, but he forced his breath into steady, shallow bursts. He had spent a childhood learning how to stay alive. Now his adulthood demanded he learn how to kill. A faint column of dust rose on the far end of the trail. That was the sign. Tonight, only 6 riders, scouts checking routes, marking targets, whispering which slave cabins would burn next. The main band would come later, with torches and ropes. Marcel could have let these men pass. He could have remained a shadow in the cane, waited for the real threat another night. But he remembered Clara, the quiet girl from the sugar mill who had been dragged off the road months ago and found floating in the marsh 3 days later. He remembered the sound her mother made. That was the night Marcel decided the bayou would take back what white men spilled into it. The riders slowed their horses at the bend, murmuring to each other. Their torches were unlit. They planned to map the trail first. That was their mistake. Darkness belonged to the swamp, not to them. Marcel reached behind him for the small sack he'd buried the night before. Inside were tools he had carefully collected. 2 glass jars filled with crushed fireflies and swamp phosphorus, stolen from a fisherman's shack. When shaken, they glowed sickly and green, like the eyes of creatures that had never forgiven the living. He waited until the riders were almost even with him. Then he rose silently and hurled both jars into the air. They shattered above the riders. A rain of green fire fell on their heads. The horses screamed. The men cursed, clawing at their faces, believing devils had descended or ghosts had reached from the trees. The bayou loved fear. It magnified it, mixed it with humidity until it tasted like poison in the lungs. Marcel lunged from the cane as one rider tried to light his torch in panic. Before the match struck, Marcel's machete carved through the man's wrist. Blood sprayed the dust. The torch fell unlit to the ground. Another rider reached for his rifle. Marcel smashed the butt of his machete against the man's throat, dropping him sideways off the horse. The animal bolted, tangling reins around the fallen man's legs and dragging him through briars. 3 fled immediately, screaming as the glowing green paste clung to their clothing. They rode like demons chased them, not understanding the demon was still crouched in the cane field, watching. One man remained. The leader. He kicked his horse forward and charged Marcel. The ground trembled, the cane rattled. Marcel stepped sideways, waiting. Then he slashed the horse's bridle. The animal bucked wildly, rearing and throwing the rider backward. The man hit the ground with a crack that was both bone and pride. He scrambled for his revolver, but Marcel planted his foot on the weapon. "You think the night gone save you?" The man spat. Dirt stuck to his teeth. Marcel crouched, eyes steady. "No, but the night knows me." The man swung a handful of dirt into Marcel's eyes and rolled away. He ran stumbling toward the trail, screaming for his scattered men. Marcel blinked the grit from his lashes, started after him, but something stopped him. A whisper, the bayou's whisper. It rustled through the cane, slipping around him like a cold ribbon of wind. Marcel froze, listening. The hair on his arms lifted. Something else was coming. Not 6 riders. Not scouts. A full company. 15, maybe 20. Marcel looked toward the trail. The leader was running straight toward them. If he reached the others, if he told them what he saw, the cane field would burn tonight. The slave quarters would burn with it. People would die. Marcel gripped his machete until his knuckles cracked. The bayou whispered again. This time, Marcel understood. He had not destroyed 6 riders. He had started a war. The bayou was a different creature at night, alive, whispering, shifting, hiding dangers and secrets beneath its black skin. The Klan riders believed their torches could tame it. That fire made them kings, even here. But the moment they crossed the Spanish moss curtain, the air thickened, the humidity rising like the breath of something ancient watching. And Isaac was somewhere in that darkness. News of the riders' return had spread through the quarters before sunset. 30 men this time, not 12. 30 men with rope, kerosene, rifles, and the confidence of those who had never been denied anything. They had come for revenge, for humiliation, for blood. They had come because a single cane cutter had embarrassed them, scattered them, left 3 of their own limping home in mud. Tonight they planned to even the score, but Isaac had been waiting, watching, listening. He stood knee-deep in the marsh waters, black skin coated with mud until he vanished into it. In his hands were the tools he'd spent 2 days building, hand-cut snare ropes, soaked in sap, sharpened cane-splitting spears, clay jars filled with swamp gas he'd trapped like a chemist. The bayou was his workshop, and he had prepared it like a battlefield. He remembered the promise he'd whispered over old Sam's grave. "Ain't no rider crossing this trail ever gonna leave clean again. Not while I'm breathing." Torches glowed through the trees, at last 30 flickering flames bobbing like angry fireflies. Hooves splashed into the shallow water. The riders shouted, confident, comfortable, unaware that the swamp had already decided their fate. Isaac exhaled and pulled the first vine. A massive snap cracked through the darkness as a suspended log heavier than 4 men swung down from the branches above. It struck the lead riders before they could scream. Horses shrieked, rearing. Men fell, helmets slamming into cypress knees. Chaos exploded. "What in? The devil's here." Spread out. Isaac didn't wait. He moved like a shadow along the edge of the trail, cutting another vine. A rope whipped tight around the legs of 2 horses, sending both beasts crashing onto their riders. Screams followed, drowning beneath swamp water. Torches flickered wildly. Then one torch went out, then another, then another. Not by accident, by Isaac's clay jars. He hurled them from the trees, the gas inside sucking oxygen like a greedy monster. Flames vanished with a loud whip, leaving riders blinded. "Light 'em again." "I can't, they won't start, damn this wet air." "This swamp ain't wet, the devil's in it." Isaac smiled grimly. "The devil? No. Just a man with nothing to lose." He leapt from the brush and rammed a cane spear through the thigh of a rider trying to reload his rifle. The man screamed, dropping the weapon. Isaac disappeared before anyone could turn toward the sound. Gunshots cracked at empty branches. Water rippled. Another rider toppled into a pit Isaac had disguised with leaves 6 feet deep, lined with sharpened stumps. He didn't scream long. "He's one man. Find him." But Isaac was no longer a single man. He was 20 shadows. He struck from the left, vanished, then struck again from the right. A quick snap kick to a rider's jaw dropped him instantly. A rock hurled at a torchman cracked ribs. Another clay jar silenced the last remaining fire. Darkness swallowed the entire trail. A black silence settled, a silence that made men feel watched, hunted, judged. Now the riders were truly blind. Lanterns. Lantern. Isaac blew the reed whistle he had carved. Low, slow, haunting. The same whistle old Sam used to sing with while cutting cane. The riders froze. The sound rippled through the swamp, echoing, multiplying until it felt like 20 men were whistling around them, circling them. A grown Klansman began to cry. Something splashed inches from his boots. He fired blindly and hit another rider in the shoulder. Isaac moved closer, every step deliberate, controlled. He could strike again, kill every one of them if he wished. But that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted them terrified, broken, unable to ride these trails again. He wanted them to remember this night every time they saw cane bending in the wind. And so, one by one, he disarmed them, snatching rifles, snapping the wheels of their revolvers, cutting saddle straps so they toppled from their mounts. A few tried to swing fists at the darkness. He answered with strikes, swift as lightning. When the last man collapsed into the mud, Isaac stepped into the faint moonlight where they could finally see him. Just him, one man, covered in mud, breathing hard, eyes shining with a fury that couldn't be drowned. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The riders crawled away, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. and Isaac watched them scramble back toward their world of wooden porches and bright lamps, a place where they believed monsters lived in stories, not in swamps. He whispered, not loud enough for them to hear. 20 left to go. Then he melted into the bayou again because the night belonged to him, and the war had only begun. The riders did not expect the night to answer them. They rode with the same arrogance they always did, swaggering on horseback through the cane rows, torches bobbing like fiery insects above their heads, breathing loud, laughing louder, knives bouncing at their hips. They thought the darkness would hide them. They thought the swamp was theirs, but the bayou had a memory, and Silas had taught it to breathe. Up in the low-leaning cypress canopy, hidden in a cradle of branches thick with moss, Silas watched them come. He had been waiting for hours, letting the mosquitoes bite him, letting the sweat soak every inch of him. He didn't move, didn't scratch, didn't blink too long. Patience was its own weapon. Below him, the narrow trail tightened between two great cypress stumps, the place he had chosen weeks ago. A bottleneck, a choke point, a throat he intended to close. Exactly 30 riders tonight, just as his friend little Benji had warned him. The boy had counted them from the fields, where the riders had passed earlier, showing off, dragging a young enslaved man by the wrists behind one horse. The boy they dragged was dead by nightfall. Silas had seen the body. Tonight was not justice, it was repayment. The leader, Judge Rawls, rode in front, his robe flapping from under his coat, white hood loose around his neck. He always removed the hood when no one of importance was watching. The man liked to be recognized. Vanity often killed faster than bullets. Silas reached slowly, silently, to the rope he had tied earlier. The swamp cicadas drowned every small sound. Perfect. Rawls halted his horse as the trail constricted. Hold, he ordered. Torches high. 30 flames rose. 30 shadows jumped backward across the trees. 30 men thought they controlled the night. Silas pulled the rope. The forest answered. A net of dry moss, twigs, and hidden tar jars fell from the branches, smashing across the heads of the first 10 riders. Their torches touched the tar touched the flames. Fire erupted upward in a feral burst too fast, too hot, too shocking to comprehend. Men screamed, horses bucked, the bayou smelled like burning cloth and panic. Silas dropped from the tree, landing lightly in the chaos. He sprinted low, using the blaze and the flailing animals as cover. A rider swung at him with a blade. Silas ducked, grabbed the man's ankle, and yanked him off the horse. The crash of bones against roots echoed through the clearing. Another rider tried to shoot. The gun clicked wet powder, thanks to the humidity Silas counted on. Silas slammed the back of his machete into the man's throat, but fire was only the first part of the trap. The second part was the bayou itself. The rope Silas had anchored earlier ran beneath the mud. He kicked one loose as he passed. A line of sharpened cane stakes, hidden under water, swung up like the teeth of some ancient swamp creature. Horses screamed as legs were cut. Riders toppled into the murky water. Some fled, some drowned. Others scrambled blindly into the dark trees, calling for help that wasn't coming. Judge Rawls, face red and furious, managed to steady his horse. "Show yourself," he roared, the firelight turning him monstrous. Silas stepped into the glow. Rawls froze. He had forgotten Silas had a face, a body, a name. It was easier to hate shadows than flesh. "You," Rawls spat. "You ungrateful savage." Silas moved first. They collided in a blur, Rawls swinging a pistol like a hammer, Silas blocking it with the side of his machete. Rawls grabbed Silas by the throat. Silas twisted, slammed an elbow into Rawls's ribs, ducked under his arm, and drove the judge's own momentum into a cypress trunk. The man gasped, wind knocked out of him. "You think you're the knight?" Rawls snarled. "You're nothing." Silas's eyes were steady, cold. "I'm the part you never bothered to see." Rawls fired. The shot went wild, grazing Silas's arm. Pain ripped through him, but pain was familiar. Pain was an old friend. Silas grabbed Rawls's hand, slammed it against the trunk, and with a single brutal strike of the machete's blunt edge, crushed the judge's wrist. The pistol fell. Rawls collapsed to his knees, shaking, staring up as Silas lifted the machete again. "Not to kill him. Not yet. I want you alive," Silas said quietly, voice low as the swamp. "So you can tell the others what hunted you tonight." Rawls trembled. Why spare me?" Silas leaned close enough that Rawls could smell the sweat, the blood, the smoke. "Because fear travels faster than bodies." Without another word, Silas disappeared into the dark, leaving Rawls kneeling in the mud, surrounded by the dying embers of 30 extinguished torches. And the bayou closed in again, swallowing the last screams as if it had been waiting centuries to do so. The night after the ambush was one of the quietest nights the bayou had ever known, so quiet that Elijah could hear the sweat sliding down his own neck. He had not slept. None of the people at the quarters had. Every ear stayed open, waiting for the next sound, the next hoofbeat, the next explosion of light. The Klan did not lose 30 horses and 30 men without sending someone back for vengeance. But morning came soft and blue. The cane fields whispering like nothing had changed. Children stepped outside first, timid, wide-eyed, as if the sun itself might be a trick. Grown folks followed slowly, still half expecting a burning cross to be standing in the yard. Elijah stood with his back against the stable post, sharpening his cane knife on a stone. He did not know if the riders would return today, tonight, or next week, but they would return. Men like that did not accept humiliation. And no matter how the newspapers or sheriffs twisted the story, the riders would know someone had done this deliberately. Someone prepared traps. Someone waited in the dark. They would come for him. But the way Elijah saw it, fear was a luxury. And he had gone his whole life without luxuries. Late afternoon brought a stranger. A man on foot, limping fast, covered in mud and leaves. He burst into the quarters shouting, "They coming! They coming down from the east road!" Women snatched babies. Men threw down their tools. Someone rang the warning bell. "How many?" Elijah asked, already tying a rope around his waist, the other end holding a pouch of caltrops, sharpened like jagged stars. "Don't know, maybe 10, maybe 20. Saw torches." "Good," Elijah said, surprising even himself. "Let 'em bring all they got." He walked toward the cane fields with calm, steady steps. The young ones followed him with their eyes, whispering. Some said he had the spirit of the swamp in him, that the bayou rose to protect him. Others said he was cursed and blessed at the same time. Elijah didn't correct either group. They could believe whatever helped them sleep. Behind him, the sun dropped low, fiery red, spilling color through the cane stalks. The first hoofbeat came at dusk. Then another. Torches flickered like angry fireflies between the trees. This time the riders came quieter, more careful, creeping down the road, scanning everything. Their earlier arrogance was gone. Fear made them smarter. Elijah crouched among the cane, breath slow, knife held loose in his hand. His traps were laid ropes rigged to branches, hidden pits covered with leaves, bamboo spikes dipped in swamp mud that stung worse than fire. Nothing lethal, just enough to break a man's confidence. He waited, listened. The riders approached the clearing near the sugar sheds, the same path they had charged last time. But tonight, they dismounted first. That meant trouble. They wanted to search the ground. A voice rose among them, deep and angry. "Find the bastard. He's here. I know he's here." Elijah grinned. Recognition was always the first step toward fear. The search party spread out, torches swaying through the dark. One rider stepped right where Elijah wanted him onto the tension line between two bamboo stalks. There was a snap, then a scream. The branch whipped hard, smashing the man in the chest and sending him backward into a pit Elijah had dug hours earlier. He disappeared with a howl, torch flying from his hand. Panic rattled the others. Elijah didn't wait. He moved like a shadow, slicing through the cane with his knife, not at flesh but at wrists and shoulders, wounds that dropped torches and raised chaos but didn't kill. Every slash was precise. Every step was calculated. He used their fear, their blindness in the cane, the way the fire threw shadows that confused their sight. Another rope trap yanked a man upward by the ankle, dangling him from a tree like a shrieking lantern. Another fell onto the caltrops and screamed so loudly birds burst from the trees. "Elijah!" someone shouted. "Elijah Cole, show yourself." He nearly laughed. "If you know my name," he murmured. "You know you shouldn't be calling it this close to the water." He kicked a stone into the bayou, and the riders spun toward the sound. A bad mistake. The torches went too close to the mud hole, the one place the swamp never forgave. The ground sank under them in one slow, thick gulp. Horses whinnied, men cursed. One torch fell and hissed out in the wet earth. Elijah didn't need to fight what the swamp could finish for him. In minutes, half the riders were limping, trapped, or scrambling to retreat. The rest fled into the woods, shouting promises of revenge that even they knew they couldn't keep. Elijah stepped out of the cane once the last hoofbeat faded. Behind him, the people of the quarters emerged slowly, first the men, then the women, then the children. Their faces were lit only by the moon. They stared at him, not in fear, not in disbelief, but with the dawning understanding that something had shifted tonight. The riders could no longer command terror here. The bayou was no longer theirs. Elijah Cole had made it into a fortress, a dangerous one, a living one, and it was only the beginning. The sky over the bayou pressed low and heavy, swollen with clouds that never burst but carried a threat in their silence. Cicadas rasped in the trees, but even they seemed cautious tonight. Word had spread quietly, like a fever about the riders who had vanished on the trail and the strange, torchless night that swallowed them. But fear works both ways, and the Klan, humiliated and raging, was coming back. Isaiah knew it long before anyone else did. He felt it in the shift of the current, the way frogs went quiet, the way wind failed to stir the cane. The bayou wasn't calm, it was bracing. By sunset, 3 slaves from distant fields had already arrived, carrying whispers. "They're coming again, 30, maybe 40. Got dogs this time. Heard 'em say they'll burn every shack from here to the bend." Isaiah listened with his jaw tight and his hands still. He was sharpening no blade, loading no gun. He simply watched the bayou, its darkening waters glimmering with streaks of dying sunlight. "You gonna fight again?" one of the men asked him. Isaiah didn't answer. Not yet. He had promised himself after the last ambush that he'd avoid more killing. He had done what he needed. He had proven the night belonged to him, and not to men in white hoods. But the news wasn't done yet. A little boy, barefoot, panting, ran down the slope. "Isaiah, they took Miss Lorette, your teacher lady." Isaiah's head snapped around so sharply the boy flinched. Lorette Beaufort, educated, stubborn, and reckless with her kindness, had been teaching slave children to read when she thought no one watched. The Klan had watched. "They took her to the clearing," the boy wheezed. "Said they gon' make an example." The words struck Isaiah harder than any blow. The long, simmering anger inside him snapped awake. He rose. Slowly, like a tide pulling itself up. "You men stay here," he ordered. "No," one protested. "We ain't letting you go alone. You go. You die," Isaiah said, voice deep as thunder. "Tonight ain't yours." Then he added, "The bayou listens to me, not to y'all." They understood. They stepped back. Isaiah vanished into the cane. The Klan had dragged Lorette to the old gum tree that bent crooked over the water. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. She was on her knees, hands bound, face bruised but unbroken. "Teach dogs to read, ya witch," the leader sneered. "Think you smarter than us? Think these animals deserve letters?" She spit blood at his boots. They slapped her hard enough to ring through the trees. "Get the rope," someone called. "Light the torches." But the torches wouldn't catch. 3 men tried. Flame flickered, flared, then died. The leader cursed, tried a 4th time. Nothing. The men shifted uneasily. "Maybe the air's wet," one muttered. "It ain't the air," someone else whispered. "It's him." It was ban-suspected. They meant Isaiah. Rumors about him were spreading faster than fire ever could. Isaiah emerged from the cane like something carved out of the night itself. No weapon, no torch, just the man. Behind him, the bayou whispered soft ripples, like it recognized him. "Well, look here," the leader said with a grin stretched too thin. "The swamp devil shows up." Isaiah didn't blink. "Let her go." Laughter spread around the circle, forced, anxious. "You gon' stop us with what? Your hands? The swamp your friend?" Isaiah stepped closer. "Yes," and the bayou answered. A sudden wind whipped across the clearing, bending cane, licking at their hoods. The horses bucked and snorted. The dogs, usually savage, whimpered and backed away, tails between their legs. Then the water rose. Just a little, just enough for every man to hear it moving where nothing should move. Torches refused to light again. No one laughed now. "You boys should go home," Isaiah said. "Wind's wrong tonight. We ain't afraid of no swamp tricks." The leader spat, though his eyes darted wildly. "Get him." 4 men rushed. Isaiah didn't step back. He moved forward fast, smooth, brutal. His fist dropped the first man instantly. The second swung a rifle. Isaiah grabbed it, snapped it in half, and used the stock to floor the third. But the fourth man got behind him lifting a blade, until the bayou surged. A wall of water not high, but strong enough crashed through the roots. It struck the attacker's legs, sweeping him into the muck. He screamed as the reeds tangled around him like hands. The Klan froze. "That ain't natural," someone whispered. "That's the devil." Another breathed. Lorette, bound but fearless, shook her head. "That's a man," she said. "A man you fools should have left alone." The leader tried to rally them. "There's 40 of us." "Shoot him." They lifted rifles, but every gun jammed. All of them. Every trigger refused. The air was too wet, the powder too damp, the bayou too alive. Panic hit them like lightning. "Run. Fall back. He controls the damn swamp." They trampled each other, trying to flee. Horses reared. Dogs snapped in terror. Men dove into the cane, slipping, cursing, screaming as dark water swallowed their courage. Only the leader remained, trembling, pointing a useless gun at Isaiah. "What are you?" the man choked. Isaiah stepped closer, his face carved with quiet rage. "I'm the man you should have never hunted." He broke the rifle in the leader's hands, lifted him by the collar, and dropped him into the mud. "Tell the rest," Isaiah growled. "The bayou ain't yours anymore." Then he cut Lorette loose. Lorette leaned against him, dizzy but alive. "You saved me," she whispered. Isaiah shook his head. "The bayou saved you." "No," she murmured. "It answered you." Isaiah didn't reply. The night around them hummed softly, like a great wild thing settling back into sleep. The Klan had come with fire. They left with fear. And Isaiah? He had not become a monster. He had simply reminded monsters that the dark was not theirs to claim. The moon hung over the bayou like a watchful, bone-white guardian, its reflection trembling on the black water as though the night itself was shivering. The trail that had witnessed the death of 30 riders was silent, now too silent. Even the frogs held their throats, and the crickets refused to speak. Kane stood on the edge of the cane field with his machete resting against his shoulder. He knew this quiet. It was the kind that settled only before a storm or before the truth forced itself out of hiding. He listened, really listened, and in the distance, faint but unmistakable, he heard the soft crunch of a single horse's hooves. Not 30 this time, just one. But one could be more dangerous than a crowd depending on the soul who rode it. Beside him, Elijah tightened his grip on his hunting knife. At only 17, he had already seen more death than most men twice his age. Behind them, the rest of the group 9 escaped slaves who had thrown their fates in with Cain stood ready, breath thick with fear. Cain raised his hand for silence. They obeyed instantly. The rider came into view slowly, almost deliberately. It was a pale gray horse, tired and thin, its reins loose as though the animal guided itself. On its back sat a figure slumped forward, hat hanging low. Elijah whispered, "Is it a trap?" Cain didn't answer. He stepped out of the sugarcane shadows and into the moonlight, machete gripped low, blade pointing like a finger accusing the night. The horse stopped. The rider didn't move. Cain stepped closer. That was when he smelled it, the coppery tang of blood, old blood, dried, cracked, clinging like dust. He reached up and tipped back the rider's hat. The man's face was bloated, blue around the lips, eyes glassy with death. A rope mark burned black around his neck. Someone had sent a message. The horse suddenly jerked forward as though relieved of a burden. The rider toppled sideways and fell into the mud with a wet thump. A note had been pinned to the dead man's coat, written in uneven strokes. "Cain Walker, we know your name now, and we know the names of the ones with you. 41 riders come for you by dawn." Elijah's face tightened. 41? They doubled it. More than doubled, Kane said, voice even. This ain't about revenge anymore. This is about wiping us off the map. Behind him, Ruth's voice cracked with fear. We can't run no more. They'll track us. They got dogs, rifles, all the land on their side. And what we got? Another man asked. Kane turned to them slowly. The moon lit half his face, leaving the other half in total shadow just the way he felt inside. We got time, he said. Not much, but enough. We got night. We got the marsh. And we got what the riders don't have. Elijah swallowed. What's that? Kane lowered the machete and pointed to the dark tangle of trees, roots, and water that made the bayou impossible for any outsider to understand. We got a home field. A murmur of hope, thin, fragile, but alive, moved through the group. Kane knelt beside the dead rider, searching his pockets. He found a torn scrap of map, marking a clearing not far from the river. The riders would likely set up camp there before the final push at dawn. He stood and turned to his people. We ain't waiting for them to come. We strike first, quiet, fast, split them before they even know we're near. 18-6, Ruth shook her head. But 41 men, Kane said. Not 41 spirits. They bleed, they fear. And tonight they try to walk into a swamp that don't want them. Kane looked back at the hanging moss, the gnarled cypress roots sticking out of the water like warning fingers. The bayou listened. The bayou approved. He felt it. The plan formed itself in his mind shadows, choke points, mud pits deep enough to swallow a horse whole, and the lantern trick his father taught him long before the world turned wicked. We go in 2 groups, Kane said. One to drive them, one to close the trap. The escaped slaves exchanged glances. None argued. Not now. Not with death one sunrise away. As they prepared to move, Elijah tugged Kane's sleeve. You think we can win? No, Kane said. Then he cracked the smallest, hardest grin. I think we can make 'em lose. They slipped through the cane like ghosts, the bayou accepting them as its own. Each footstep was swallowed by mud, each breath softened by thick air. The night sky darkened, clouds drifting across the moon like a curtain falling on the world. Hours later, they reached the ridge overlooking the clearing. Campfires dotted the ground below, too many flames to count without shivering. Elijah exhaled slowly. 41 riders, all right. Kane crouched, eyes narrowing. Let's make sure none of them see the sunrise. The bayou wind drifted past them, tugging their clothes, whispering its approval. The ambush would begin with one sound. Just one. Kane pulled his father's hollowed gourd whistle from his pocket and held it to his lips. The world held its breath. Then he blew. A sound like a dying bird cut through the swamp, sharp, mournful, and echoed by the night. And the cane cutters' war began again. The bayou healed slow. For months after the night, the Klan riders vanished into its throat. The trail along Canebreaker Bend stayed unnaturally quiet. No laughter from drunken overseers, no torchlight reflected in the black water. The cypress knees stood like old sentinels, watching, murmuring whenever the wind blew across the swamp. People said the place had changed, come awake somehow. Others whispered it had always been awake. They only noticed after blood had been spilled. The plantation owners never spoke openly of what happened. To do so would mean admitting that 30 armed riders, men who believed themselves untouchable, had ridden into the swamp and simply did not come back. Their families wrote letters. Their brothers searched the thickets. Their widows prayed. Their hounds howled and refused to follow the scent. But the swamp did not return what it had taken, and deep down, those who lived in the big houses knew exactly why. For the enslaved people across Mississippi, the story spread like a secret hymn. A whisper first, a rumor second, a quiet, trembling hope last. They spoke of a cane cutter named Isaiah, a man who lived half in the fields and half in the shadows, a man with arms like carved mahogany and a gaze that never fully returned from whatever horrors he had seen. A man who had walked into the swamp with a machete and walked out with the night itself trembling behind him. Some said he had been killed. Some said he had become a ghost. Others said he had crossed the river and joined the Maroons deep in the wetlands, becoming something more legend than flesh. The overseers feared all versions, Summer rolled into autumn, and autumn into a brittle winter. The cane rose grew tall again, green and sharp as spears. Work songs filled the dawn, but quieter than before, laced with a strange caution, as though the singers knew the air was listening. The new master, a pale, thin man sent from Virginia, tried to re-establish order. He brought fresh riders, new torches, new discipline, but none of them rode the Bayou Trail after dark. Even at daylight, their horses balked and snorted at the edge of the cypress line. Dogs whined. The men claimed it was bad footing, bad light, bad luck, but the elderly midwives knew different. "The swamp keeps memory," old Mabel muttered whenever she passed the bend, "and memory feeds the things that sleep in water." One evening, when the moon rose fat and amber, a soft knock came at the slave cabins. Not frantic, not fearful, almost gentle. Tobias, the young boy who had once watched Isaiah sharpen his cane knife, opened the door and froze. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, mud-streaked, eyes steady. "Isaiah?" Tobias whispered, breath-catching. But the man raised a hand. "Don't say my name. Not here." And yet it was him. Older now, or perhaps simply harder. His scars looked deeper, his silence heavier. But there was something else too, something freer. He wore no shackles, no chains, no plantation rags. His clothes were patched, travel-worn, but undeniably his own. "Are you alive?" Tobias whispered. Isaiah smiled a tired smile. "I'm many things," he said. "Tonight, alive is one of them." He didn't step inside, didn't stay long, just looked around at the dim firelight, at the familiar faces he had once shared misery with. "How long you here?" Tobias breathed. "Just passing through," Isaiah said. "Where you going?" Isaiah's eyes lifted toward the dark horizon, where the swamp met the sky. "Wherever a man ain't hunted," he murmured. "Wherever our people can breathe." He began to walk away, footsteps soft in the wet earth. Tobias called out, voice cracking, "Will you come back?" Isaiah paused, but he didn't turn. "Not unless needed," he said. "But listen well." His voice dropped to a low rumble, like the bayou's own whisper. That night wasn't about revenge. It was a message. "A message?" Tobias asked. Isaiah nodded once. "That we ain't powerless. That the land remembers us when men try to erase us. And that one day, even if not in our lifetime, every chain they forged will rust, and every name they buried will rise." Then he vanished into the tree line, swallowed by shadow and cypress roots. Years later, when freedom finally came late, bitter, and uneven, old freedmen still told the tale of the 30 riders who vanished in a single night. They told it to children who would never know the crack of the overseer's whip. They told it to grandchildren who would inherit a world shaped by struggle and courage. They told it as a warning and a promise. Fear the night only if you stand on the wrong side of justice. And each time the story was told, the swamp rustled softly, as though listening, as though remembering. For the bayou keeps all stories, all secrets. And some say that even now, on certain nights, when the torches along the riverbank flicker, a tall figure moves between the reeds, silent, steady, watchful, a cane cutter who once rose against the darkness and became something legendary in its wake.